the smartest model of like, yes, have your vision. If you have a small team, you're not going to be able to go from 0 to 1,000 in one jump. You will likely need to find some sort of semblance of fit in one small area first and use that to then pivot to more, until eventually you reach the big global vision and you're a multi-billion-dollar company. We say, let's fix your confusing positioning. And then we say, we'll help you identify your target audience, find your unique differentiation, turn it into clear and compelling homepage copy. Trust the algorithm in many ways as an effective way to determine what people want.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Long Game. My guest today is Anthony Pierri. He has a wild background as a product marketer and a wealth of knowledge about going into answering very simple, straightforward questions on how to message and position your product, specifically your homepage. We all know that we're supposed to go niche when building a product, and yet it is very difficult to take your vision and make it very specific for the right customer segment and to sell. And this is exactly what he and his co-founder do at Fletch PMM. In this episode, we talk about the buyer persona. We go through basically a masterclass on how to position, brand, market, communicate your product, and specifically update your homepage. We screen share, we walk through examples, we get into the psychology of the buyer, and so much more. Anthony and his co-founder have worked with over 300 companies. They have a perfected playbook on how to go through this process of product marketing and updating a homepage. And I learned a ton. I hope you enjoy this episode and learn something as well. Sit back and enjoy. So tell me about what you've been up to, what you've been building, and let's kind of just jump in the middle.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm the co-founder of a product marketing consultancy called Fletch PMM, short for product marketing. Product marketers, we got the short end of the stick, being second to product managers. They got PM. So product marketing manager is PMM, and now PMM stands for product marketing, which is only just
early
one
mover advantage type deal.
Exactly. Yeah.
PMs. Yeah.
Really annoying. But so Fletch PMM primarily work with early stage B2B SaaS startups, usually venture backed, specifically trying to help them figure out how to position their product. And so for us, positioning is answering these 4 questions. What is the product? Who is it for? What does it replace? And why is it better? And then we help them figure out the answers to those questions, along with the supporting messages that they would need to make those answers actually stick. And then we take all of that and help them rewrite the homepage of their website to reflect that new positioning. So we often see that when people do positioning exercises internally or with an external partner, the output is often a PowerPoint deck, a Google Sheets, something where it's like, here's all of our key stuff, but then it gets either put into a folder, like a Google Drive folder, and never looked at again. Or if they take it and actually try to execute on it, the handoff is where things all start breaking. So when they do the baton handoff where it's like, all right, we've got the strategy, now let's put it into the homepage, let's put it into our sales deck. It gets in the hands of, copywriters and designers, and they start making all sorts of bold decisions, what sounds better and what looks better. And by the end of it, you're like, wait a minute, this website doesn't reflect the positioning at all. They're like, yeah, we couldn't, that was too many words. We couldn't fit that in. So we used this tagline instead. And, we didn't really want to sound negative. So we put this in it. And like all of a sudden, all the positioning strategy is gone. So we were like, rather than just delivering this pure strategy deliverable, which is a lot of people do, we were like, let's get you one tangible go-to-market asset that is highly visible and highly accessible by everyone. Everyone has access to the website. You can type in the URL and there it is, right? So customers see it, internal company sees it, VCs see it. And so it's like a much better forcing function to keep everyone aligned. And then when you start to build other assets like sales decks and content and, whatever it might be, you have a living thing that you're able to make it based off of, not some sort of weird esoteric, like pre-marketing strategy document, which often is like too vague and general to even be usable. So that's basically what we do. We have this process that we've now done with over 300 companies, and that's just me, my co-founder, Rob, and we have a copywriter, her name's Kate, just really the three of us doing this 300 times. So there's no big team. We work with loosely 15 companies a month, and we take them through the defined process. It's very productized, as you could imagine, which gives us a couple advantages, right? We get a ton of iterations, which makes the framework and the process so much more robust. If you think of it like an LLM, the more data we feed the framework, the better the model gets. And so companies 1 through 10 that worked with us got a pretty bad model. We were charging a lot less back then, so it was kind of a trade-off. You got an early discount for the worse, beta version. Now it's much more refined. It's gone through the paces with tons of companies of varying sizes, from very early stage companies that don't even have a product yet, all the way through publicly traded companies, right, that have hundreds of thousands of millions of views on the homepage. So the iterations really helps. And there's the pattern matching of being able to see the same problem appearing over and over and over again, and be able to understand what the ailments are, why does it come about, what are ways that you can help people get out of those problems, unstuck. So we came up in a very custom service agency world and have now pivoted to the dark side of just pure, extremely productized, extremely skinny, narrowed focus and expertise. And so, so that's kind of the high level overview, maybe a little longer answer than you were looking for, but feel free to dig in any part of that feels interesting.
Well, I actually want to start on the tail end there. Why the dark side? Why is it the dark side?
Well, I mean, because the thing is that like most agencies by default are custom services. Even when they think they're not custom services, they're usually custom services. So like, and maybe this is too extreme, but I'm like, if you have to write up a scope, you're custom services. Like we have the same contract that every single company will use. And we rarely, if ever, change anything on it. And so like true productized businesses in our mind are rarer and are very contrary to most freelancers, consultants, advisors, because the whole thing is like, I used to work at a company and I was just told to stay in my lane. Now I want to go out on my own and I want to work on a lot of different projects. Or like people hear about productized, they're like, doesn't that sound like it would get so boring? You're literally doing the same project over and over and over. Like, I want to work on lots of stuff. And we're like, yes, it is true. It sometimes feels like a grind when you're doing multiple, 75-minute workshops with different companies in a single day. That can feel very taxing. But all the trade-offs are more than worth it in our opinion, right? Being able to get that expertise, being so referable, the word of mouth is just 10 times easier when it's the same thing. Anytime anyone's struggling in this very niche space we've focused on with their homepage or with positioning or something like that, like people are like, do you guys know anyone who helps with this? We're the first name that comes up because no one else is willing to go as narrow as we are around the specific group. So we just believe that there's a huge strategic advantage. But in general, I think it goes counterintuitive to what most people who do custom services and just professional services in general are thinking about doing.
I feel like that also applies to just productized services in general, or a product or a SaaS product, because one of the things that you really emphasize is reducing vagueness or being more specific, being more niche. And even how you talk about Fletch, like you guys focus on being very specific at doing your one thing, your one way, and doing it consistently and repeatably. Why is there that drive in founders, in product people, in all of us, I guess, to want to have things be more broad, be more vague, address more people? Like clearly that's a struggle that I'm sure you've helped many 300 plus companies and products get past. What's the need for vagueness that people are perpetually trying to grasp at?
Well, if you think about it in the stages, let's take a product company. The stages, as you get bigger, the problem to go broad, or let's say the pull to go broad is always there, but the underlying reason changes. So when you're very early stage, you haven't really found much pull at all. The reason you go broad is because you are seeking what opportunities are out there. And you don't want to close off.
Trying to see what resonates with someone.
Exactly. Perfect. Exactly right. So you're saying if I go out there, let's imagine Fletch in day one, and we did not go super narrow in the very beginning. There's actually, if you look at our LinkedIn banner, it's the original one that we did. And it was, we're helping founders market hard to market products. And it's
saw
so
that.
funny
I
because
like
we
that.
look at that and we're like, it's so vague, so broad. And we would get people asking us, can you help us with our pricing model? Can you help us start, a community? Like, you guys use community management? So when we cast the broad net, we did get a variety of people who were asking us for very different things. And we quickly discovered, not quickly, I should say maybe, 6 to 9 months, we started uncovering this niche around homepages and positioning and stuff like that. And then we tried to focus as quickly as we could. And we would actually try to, every month or so, ratchet down even more. How can we focus more? What's the place we want to get to? So in the early stages, people don't want to focus because they don't want to remove potential places where there could be market pull. Totally understandable. Then you get to growth stage.
In that instance, it sounds like vagueness is okay because you're trying to find like the initial pull of product market fit. Is that accurate?
Well, it depends. In a service business, it's probably more okay because each different iteration does not require developer time, right? So if you're building in a very, very lean startup MVP way, I think you could get away with being broader and bend the no-code product one way or the other, right? But when you're doing a product company, you just are not as flexible as a human service who's like, you want to do a community event? Sure, let's try that, You have to build this product, and it takes a while to do it, to get it right. And now there's all this stuff about like, people think lean startup is terrible, and they're like, you need to launch with a really polished thing. MVPs are dead, all that stuff. So there's this higher level of quality that people are looking for in the initial product. So it's harder to do that. So in those cases, like sometimes we would say it's better to do the old school lean startup thing of saying, let's launch for a specific narrow group. And then either we'll find some pull or we'll pivot and we'll switch to someone else. Because it's just very, very difficult to go broad when you're doing software in the same way that it might be a little easier and less risky as a service provider to go broad. But yeah, great question. So then we get to growth stage. Now you have a different reason that you want to stay vague. And usually this comes with funding. So investors come into the picture, they give you a nice big $10 million check, and they're expecting some big returns. And so each time that you try to narrow the focus of a founder who's raised $10 million on the promise that they're going to dominate 10 industries, they see each ratcheting down of focus as I'm losing an entire market. My TAM is shrinking. I'm never going to be able to meet the investor expectations. So we need to go after them all at once. What's the way to speak to e-commerce and logistics and manufacturing? We find some super vague message that is it's usually an outcome, right? Grow your business, increase your revenue. Well, everyone cares about that at the end of the day, right? So yeah, middle stage is usually driven by investor expectations. And then when you get really big, it switches again. Now people are staying broad because you have stakeholders, big, high-paid executives with their own P&Ls for their own business units who are all vying for the top spot because they're compensated on the performance of their specific product line. So you take something like a homepage, which then becomes a battleground. And people are like, if I could get the prime spot, I would kill it. My P&L would be amazing. I get a massive bonus. We're all stoked. And if that means the other business units in this company have to get deprioritized, so be it. So this becomes this battleground. And then often what happens is a very high level executive who's overseeing all of them, like a CMO or somebody who's in a chief spot, they'll say, we need to unite everyone. And they'll go to a brand agency. And the brand agencies that are smart realize that they are not selling a tagline. They're not selling fonts and colors. They're selling alignment, executive alignment. So they're like, what can we do to get these 10 executives all on the same page? And they'll come up with some sort of underlying theme that seems like kind of cool. None of the executives are super stoked about it, but it's better than like watching Jeff and his business line getting prime spot. If he doesn't get it, if I can't get it, then at least none of us will get it. We'll just put this vague brand message up on the top, which is like, Slack, where work happens. Like, okay, whatever.
Jeff's not winning with that tagline.
Yeah. So it happens at every stage, which is why the vast majority of B2B websites of any size company are super vague because it's always a challenge. It's like it's like a gravitational pull at every second. We're being pulled towards going broader, more vague, just for a lot of different underlying reasons.
none of the reasons that you mentioned, which maybe is the whole point, are driven by the customer. They're all
I don't think they
internal
are.
reasons. Yeah.
Exactly. Because we humans, what is confusing to a lot of people is there's a guy named Pep Lea. He's the founder of a company called Winter. I don't know if he came up with this concept, but he says it a lot, and I've heard him explain it the best. He calls it mental availability, which is, you've all seen the diagrams of how many companies there are and the MarTech diagram of there's 7,000, whatever. We've all seen these
Those
things.
product map things and
Exactly. It's
yeah.
infinite. At some level, though, the products that are remembered and have a distinct place in your brain will likely be the ones that you are more apt to buy. And so, like, to give you an example, Stripe is a payments company, right? They do payments. They do a lot of other stuff. When we started this business, we said, how are we going to collect payments? So who owned payments in my brain? Well, I heard Stripe does payments. So we went to Stripe and we got it and we used it. There's another company called Paddle. And I had seen Paddle out there in the wild. And I'd seen their founder posting stuff, heard that they're cool. I never heard what they did. It never lashed into my mind. And then later, I uncovered that Paddle also does payments. And they're actually really good for like global payments, taking into account like different tax codes of countries and stuff like that. And we started running into issues with Stripe where we were like potentially creating, doing too much business in a certain country that they would want us to give them money like taxes wise. And I was like, what does this? And after some research, we discovered that Paddle actually solves that problem. So it's like, if I had known about Paddle as payments in the first hand, I would just be way more likely to buy them. But payments is not all that Paddle does. And so for Paddle to say we do payments would be narrowing, and it would potentially get more payments customers, but all those problems I talked about before, they were growth stage. Look at all these opportunities. So we can't just say payments. We have to say, who knows what they're saying right now. And I could pull it up. It's probably something very, very broad. Let's see. And
let's check. What's Paddle's?
So they say,
Paddle.net, right? I know I've checked out with them before.
I think this might be paddle.com, at least the one I'm looking at.
Okay.
Put your billing operations on autopilot. Merchant of record, we handle your payments, tax, compliance. So it's a little bit better. I think it used to be more vague. This feels like they've actually made it a little clearer, payments, tax, and compliance. But again, billing operations, is that a real space that you can own in someone's brain? Like, I have a payment space in my brain. You have a payment spot in your brain. Is billing operations a real thing? I'm not sure. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But to your point, right? The customer mindset is to do the thing that will raise the mental availability that you actually get to live in their head. Like, that's the whole positioning concept, is owning a position in people's brains. And it's significantly more difficult to own a big, hairy positioning. Like, there's so many sales companies who are like, we want to own revenue. And it's like, that's like owning business. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You're like, you're the business company. And so you're like, who does business? Well, the business company does. Like, that's very hard to own. Like when we see companies trying to own retention or own, growth. And it's like, these are just so vague, so broad with so many different competitors. Likely you're not going to own it. And so you have just an exponentially better chance of owning a very specific place. Oh, Stripe does payments. Slack does work messages. Name your list. And all of those companies, if they heard people say that, they would immediately feel like almost the ego hit. We're so much more than that. We're not just we're not just messages. We're your workplace operating system, or whatever the hell Slack says these days. But it's like the rest of the world's like, no, you're a great messaging app. We use you for work, all of our work messages.
Do you typically have to go through some type of belief change in helping founders or whoever you're working with change their beliefs about niche is good in order to actually be able to show up in the work and in the homepages that you redesign?
100%. And we try to. This is why our go-to-market strategy is so crucial in the way that we did it. And this was not by a magic crystal ball that we knew this. It just kind of worked out this way. And in hindsight, feels like the right decision, because our whole strategy is around sharing LinkedIn thought leadership content.
And this
by
is
the time
Fletch PMM's
Yep.
particular go-to-market strategy, not the go-to-market strategy that I guess you don't do go-to-market directly. You do landing pages and strategic alignment of niching down. Yes.
Yes, exactly. We don't really coach on go-to-market because we work with so many companies of different industries. It's such a very varied field. In the same way that I was like, it's hard to own a specific, go-to-market's a huge concept. So it's like, who does go-to-market? It's like, I don't know. That's a million different things. So, but when we work with clients, ideally, the best clients are the ones who say on the sales call, I've been reading your stuff for the last year and I'm ready to work with you. And so it's like we basically battled out all those belief changes over the course of 6 to 12 months. That by the time they're ready to work with us, we don't have to be going from scratch, which ironically, unlike a lot of service providers, most of our referral projects are not our best projects. Where like a lot of consultants and service providers, they live on referrals. But for us, referrals are hard because we have to compress 6 to 12 months of belief change into a 25-minute sales call. And we're like, hey, Jeff referred you. And they're like, tell me what you do. And I'm like, oh boy, like we're starting from the very beginning. And we're like,
Yeah.
so
12 months
doing
of
all that.
education and them consuming your content is more valuable
Yep.
than the trust that they have of some referral of, hey, you should talk to these guys.
Exactly. And then even in the project, when we're giving advice, if they don't have all that context of where we're coming from, it's going to sound crazy. They're going to be like, I don't understand. Why would you tell me to go after one segment when my VC told me to go after 10? Who should I trust more? And it's like, well, your VC is slightly different goal than what I have the goal for you, which is to make sure your company exists in 6 months, and you don't run yourself into the ground and actually get a better chance of getting to all those 10 industries. Like, we love the example of people like Jeff Bezos, right? Like he's the perfect example. Unbelievably visionary, huge plan to change the world. Like in the 90s, he was like, I'm going to sell everything you can imagine on the internet. And then he goes to market as a bookstore. And everyone was like, we all forget. Jeff Bezos was once battling the big, scary market leader that was Barnes and Noble. And everyone was like, can this tiny Silicon Valley upstart defeat Barnes and Noble? And now it's like, in hindsight, it's hilarious because Amazon is, thousands of times bigger than Barnes and Noble, and Barnes and Noble is about to go out of business. Maybe they're not actually. I don't know what the state of Barnes and Noble today, but all that stuff, like that's the perfect example of like what we think is the smartest model of like, yes, have your vision. If you have a small team, you are not going to be able to go from 0 to 1,000 in one jump. You will likely need to find some sort of semblance of fit in one small area first and use that to then pivot to more until eventually you reach the big global vision and you're a multi-billion-dollar company.
What is this idea of the flexible specialist over the stable generalist?
Flexible specialist. Where
What
does that come from?
You dug into it at some point in exploring your content, and you kind of were emphasizing that it's better to be a flexible flexible specialist rather than, and kind of have that more depth and detail and niche down from a skill set perspective than more of a broad kind of holistic, a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
You must have been digging far into the archives because I'm like, I don't even remember posting that. I think I maybe know what you're talking about. I think my point, if this is what I'm thinking it was, it's like all the specialists in the world are also generalists, but they just decided to market themselves as a specialist, right? Like every person that I know who is a specialist and is killing it in the consulting or advising world also can do a bunch of other stuff.
They could do more, but they say, I'm a specialist in this.
Exactly. And it happens time and time again. But to me, it's like you're trading. It's better to be this specialist who really, really, and primarily for that same reason, for the mental availability reason. Because like you could only, if you do a lot of stuff, it's hard to be remembered. Like in the moment when I'm struggling to make YouTube ads, I'm like, who does YouTube ads? There might be a guy who does marketing and YouTube ads would be one of the 15 things that they do. I'm not going to think of the marketing guy because that's a couple steps removed. Versus if I think of the YouTube ads guy, that would be the first person who would come to mind. And so the more niched and specialized, the more likely you're going to win the business. And so to me, that's probably more where I would lean. But you might be referring to a different concept, and I'm just completely forgetting.
Well, I mean, I think that's another thing to just pull on, the fact that you have, 60,000 followers on LinkedIn, you create all this prolific content. You talked about your sales cycle starts 12 months before someone even sends you a message. What do you think about that aspect of personal branding, or even from a company perspective of company creating content versus you, the founders, creating content, and how that then just represents who you are in the world before someone even talks to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, if you can do it, it's such a superpower. Um, because like, so if we go to the old days, not even old days, but just outside of software, let's say you're making a new energy drink. You make the new energy drink and you market the new energy drink, and then you have to distribute the new energy drink to the people who are going to buy it. And the marketing and the distribution are two separate tasks. Like landing a partnership with Target and, Walgreens to sell it, to actually get the trucks of the energy drinks to bring it out. That's one whole side of the business. And then like the running of the Instagram ads and everything to get people to know that this energy drink exists, that's a different part of the business. With software or with over the internet consulting, those two things can come together in like organic content. So at the same time, the distribution and the marketing are effectively the same activity. And so what ends up happening is, if you can crack the content, the organic content algorithm, you're solving like 5 problems at once. One of them is the content that is more likely to get traction is actual real indication that there is some level of market pull for the product or service you're offering. It's like, for example, this is a silly comparison, but I'm in a band with some of my other friends. So our main strategy,
Plug it. It's what is it? Good Hangouts?
it's good hangs. You were so close. That
Good
was
Hangs.
amazing.
All right, close.
You did your research. That's good. So just to give an example, our main distribution for good hangs and our marketing is actually all the Spotify algorithm. We don't really do like ads or much organic content on TikTok or anything like that. It's really the algorithm. And so if we can make music that works with the algorithm, we're killing two birds with one stone. Like if we just made songs and we're like, nobody's listening to them, let's start paying for ad money to get them to people. There's a chance that nobody's listening to them because they're not good. And we're going to be wasting ad dollars to bring them to people, when in reality, sometimes you just want to trust the algorithm, that the algorithm really is trying to bring the right music to the right people. Or on LinkedIn, same thing. Like if you're putting out a POV or a product or whatever it is, and the algorithm is not promoting you, a lot of times creators will blame the algorithm. Oh, you're not promoting me because you only value the big creators. So it's like false. Like there's so many examples of tiny creators getting big from, like my older brother, he's a good example. He's doing a side hustle and he's been posting on LinkedIn. I've given him a little bit of coaching on the side. And he actually we both posted yesterday. I have 60,000 followers. He has 4,000. At the end of the day, our two posts, I had more impressions, more comments on mine, and he gained like 3 or 4 times more followers than I did from his post. So it's like trust the algorithm in many ways as an effective way to determine what people want. And so like with this content stuff, it's like the moment that the content starts working is actually the indication that the service or product probably has real demand for it. And so you lean into that. And like, if I was going to start a software company, it would be very similar. It would be like, could I use an organic algorithm as both my distribution and also my marketing and also my demand testing? Because if they all work together, you're in a really, really good spot. Your audience goes up, which in turn makes the pipeline go up, which in turn gives you all this insight into how people want to buy and what they want to buy and how you want to help them. So like, that's the way that we have this consistent pipeline of people coming in every month who are high quality, because we used this flywheel to basically solve those big issues all at the same time.
You consider that the content you create, should it be that all hammering down on that one message, that one unique, we help you build your landing page for product marketing? Or is it more you're touching on different topics and you're kind of layering it in, you're building out, domain expertise and you're touching on multiple areas and then narrowing the funnel over time?
Yeah, I think it's a couple. It could be different, right? Like, and be on LinkedIn, and you probably by the time this goes live, this will also have been live, so you'd be able to have seen it already. So this is exactly what you're talking about. I think, like, basically our positioning of let's fix your confusing positioning
And
will
for
help
anyone
you. Yeah,
who's kind of just listening, it's ultimately we're looking at a funnel that kind of talks about how the point of view is then embodied in the Fletch PMM homepage and structure.
So yeah, so basically, like, people will often say around positioning, like, we'll work with them, and because we're rewriting the homepage, they will say, "How do we A/B test this?" And I'm like, "Well, you will need to split the universe into two parallel universes, one where you spend 12 months as this positioning, and one where you spend 12 months as this positioning, and then we can bring the universes back together and compare which worked out more." Obviously, you cannot do that, right? Like, positioning,
A
a lot of these
truly
things
perfect
are,
split test is impossible.
yes, it's
Yeah.
impossible. And
Yeah.
so, like, my co-founder Rob, he's used the metaphor where it's like you're getting on a boat, you're leaving California, and you could either sail to Japan or Alaska. And so, like, the test of that position can be like, let's go 3 days in a row towards Alaska and then 3 days towards Japan, and then we'll compare which was better. And it's like, that's
Yeah.
not really how it
Yeah.
works, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
our positioning, for people who aren't viewing this on video, this is just a screenshot basically of our homepage, or like a representation of it, where we say in the main header, we say, let's fix your confusing positioning. And then in the subheader, we say, we'll help you identify your target audience, find your unique differentiation, turn it into clear and compelling homepage copy. And then we have supporting stuff below, right? Different other ideas. That positioning only works, and the whole offer only works if we've been successful in the marketing funnel up top, which for us is, things like LinkedIn posts, podcasts, webinar appearances, stuff like this that we're doing right now, guest newsletter posts, speaking engagements, short form videos, testimonials, right? All that stuff. And we really are convincing them of all these different messages that, like, make up our point of view, which are things like prospects do care about the product and the features, which in B2B is really kind of the hot take. Most people are like, B2B buyers don't give a crap about your product. They just want to know if you can drive the outcome. And we're like, that's not actually true for the people who look at homepages. Things like narrowing your focus is a strategic advantage. It's better to be clear than it is to be clever. Don't focus on messaging to the buyer like the executive. You should focus on messaging to like a director level champion. We say things like positioning should be visible on the homepage, where, like, some of the biggest positioning experts in the world will say publicly, you can't see positioning on the homepage. And we're like, what? Like, if you can't, that's like the whole point.
What do you mean by positioning? You mean like your position in the market?
More like the position you're trying to own. So, like, when we say, for like those 4 questions that I had talked about, what is your product? Who is it for? What does it replace? Why is it better? We're like, that should for sure be visible on the homepage. And so some people are like, no, that's more of a strategic thing. It's behind the scenes. And so, like, we have to convince them of these different ideas for them to get the final message. And so all of our posts are just sort of in this different matrix of concepts that all, in our minds, form a cohesive worldview, but aren't always just, this is why you need to buy this service. This is why. It is like a collection of ideas that support the underlying
different aspects, but that all feed to the same thing.
Exactly. So that's how it doesn't. It's not always so boring and tedious where people are like, how could you be posting about positioning every day? Wouldn't you lose interest? And it's like, well, it's not really this just one thing. It's like a collection of ideas and how interesting ways you can do it using real examples to keep it interesting.
What do people typically, what's the biggest thing that people mess up with homepages?
It's basically what we've already been talking about. It's not choosing who the homepage is for. And I think people forget that organic traffic, especially if you're an early stage company, organic traffic is like not existent. Like, most B2B startups like don't really get organic traffic. So, like, we always say that, like, one would be, and this isn't a homepage thing, it's more a website in general. They will build all these sub pages because they're like, we could service this group, and we could service this group, and we could service this use case and this industry. And so they'll build all these sub pages for each of those different potential groups, when in reality, those people, unless they are taking those messages to them, those people will never see it. And so, for example, they usually have like one marketer, maybe two, and they're in their mind, especially the founders who are not in the marketing. Like most of the time we get along with the marketers, and the founders are like, hate us. Not always, but if there's usually like, if there is a head of marketing and a
Existential threat.
founder,
Who are these people?
exactly, yeah. And the marketers, smart marketers, like understand that marketing efficiency is a direct correlated, it's directly correlated to your amount of focus, right? Like just try running an ad campaign to sales, marketing, customer success, operations, and finance all at the same time. You're just going to be, there's no way to do it, right? And versus let's run an ad campaign to sales becomes way better. So it's, the homepages are almost always a refusal to focus. And what ends up happening as a secondary consequence of that is when you can't pick who you're for and you try to speak to everyone, the only thing that would make sense is outcomes, like vague business outcomes. And then you trick yourself that you're doing good marketing because everyone on LinkedIn and, is just always commenting, nobody cares about the product. They only care about the outcome. And then you're like, oh, this is great. I actually can go after 10 segments all at the same time because they all want to increase revenue. So if I just lead with that, we increase revenue, we're going to win. And we're doing what's right. When in reality, they're shooting themselves. Exactly. And this is the thing too, is that always like another aspect is like people are like, voice of the customer is so important. And it's like, yes,
what's that
but
even
to a
supposed
point.
to mean? I don't know the phrase, the term.
It's more in like the marketing world that people say this. Voice of the customer is basically like, talk to your customers, hear what they say, and then use their exact words in your marketing. So what happens when you do voice of the customer research, especially as an early stage company, you, the founder, will likely have created a relationship with an executive at the company that ultimately bought you. And when you ask an executive why they like you as a vendor, they will speak in terms of like, you really helped us drive our, key performance indicators, our KPIs.
Outcome.
Exactly, because the executives live in outcome land. And so then the founders will take those exact quotes and be like, well, I'm doing what's good. I'm doing customer interviews and I'm going to do voice of the customer and I'm going to put it on the homepage. And they're like, I just asked the last 5 CMOs who worked with us why they liked us. And they all said because we drove business outcomes. So let's put that on the homepage. But then if you trace back to the beginning, none of those CMOs were the ones who visited the homepage. No, they were brought in 5 conversations in. Someone much more lower level was tasked with like, hey, go find us a CRM or whatever the thing is. And they went and were shopping at features and functionality and like, do you integrate with this? You integrate with that? And then ultimately they were like, okay, this seems like our best bet. And then they would say to the account executive, help me sell this to my CMO. And then the startup's account executive would be like, well, let's get them on a call. And they talk about business outcomes and all that stuff, which matters to the CMO, but again, is not the person shopping. And so what ends up happening is you get this mismatch where you have these business outcomes that mattered to the ultimate buyer, but that ultimate buyer was never even in the beginning. And then when you write for that ultimate buyer who will never come on the website in the first place, you're alienating the exact person who will come on your page, like a manager or director level, who's going to be most likely to actually start the buying process. So you end up shooting yourself in the foot thinking you're following best practices of marketing advice, when in reality, you're just making it that much harder for people to remember what you do.
That's really interesting. I talked to Shane Brennan. He's a friend of mine. He was on the podcast maybe a year ago or something, but he kind of framed this from a product and an engineering perspective about the 5 different personas that go into making a buying decision. There's the sponsor, there's the financier, there's the user of the thing, there's, maybe the end consumer. And he kind of likened it to, when you go to the grocery store, there's the person that's doing the shopping. There's a person who is paying for the checkout, and maybe it's the same person, but it could be a different person. There's the person who's going to eat the food, right? And there's kind of all these different personas. And so when you ask who, which is one of your core 4 questions, the who's the person that we are talking to on the homepage, which might be very different than who is making the decision, who is the ultimate buyer and paying for the tool.
Exactly. And to people, they'll push back and they will say, we sell to the enterprise. And enterprise buyers don't care about features, functionality, capabilities, all that stuff. They really care about, and it's like, it comes back to, if the person has no care for what a product does, how it works, how you would use it, when you would use it, why would they go on the website? Like, what would be the point of that, right? Like, when you read a Wikipedia article, you are reading Wikipedia to learn information about the thing that you've chosen to read about. You're not like reading a Wikipedia article to be inspired. You're like, I read that Wikipedia article, way too much information. It was basically just like telling me all the information. It's like, that's what a Wikipedia article is for. And they're like, I didn't get inspired at all. And it's like, of course you didn't, right? And so homepages are the same way. People think like we need to wow the prospect and inspire them. And it's like, who reads homepages that way? The only time you visit a homepage is when you say, what does that company do? Like, I think they do something. Do they do what I think they do? And then you land on it and you're hit with accelerate your business transformation and cool images. And I'm like scrolling. What? Okay,
That's actually so I personally have started doing this thing where often before a prospect call, my instinct historically was to go and look on their website and try to understand what they do. And then for a while, I was like, this is just, I don't even know. I'm clicking to the about
useless.
page and trying to read yeah. And then I started going to LinkedIn where at least there's a paragraph summary. But even that is sometimes marketing, just mumbo jumbo. We're transforming the world through motivating people with real time. And you're like, I still don't know what they're doing. So I started going to ChatGPT and I'll just throw in the URL and say, what does this company do? And I found that again, gets me to the answer that I want because the homepage doesn't tell me. That's really
exactly. Yeah, and ChatGPT, right, is really smart that way, because like, how the LLMs work, they understand the intent of when you're asking what do they do. Like, they're like, oh, you mean at a functional level, like literally what activities would I do in this? And ChatGPT will usually give you a pretty adequate answer. We do that too. Like when we work with companies, we'll look at their website when we have them fill out a big questionnaire and stuff. But oftentimes we will also do a ChatGPT ask, because it's usually the most accurate. And the funniest thing too is I can almost predict with a high degree of accuracy whatever ChatGPT says they do, the founder will be very offended at the shrunken vision of what ChatGPT says versus what they think. So like, you could imagine if it's, they're doing some sort of like scheduling software or something. If it was like, so-and-so is scheduling software, the founder would be like, oh, we're so much more than scheduling software, Like, this is a running joke.
The world.
Exactly, yeah. A running joke that we have is like, nobody wants to be in the business that they're in, Like, nobody's just willing to say like, yeah, we're a calendar app. And
yeah,
that's what we do. Like, and maybe it's just the entrepreneurial impulse is to always go bigger and grow and stuff, and you don't want to be pigeonholed. But the amount of projects that we work on, and they're like, we need to reposition. And we're like, why? And they're like, people keep calling us a scheduling tool, but we added all these other features and functionalities and products, and we need them to know about the rest of the stuff. And I'm like, what's the revenue breakdown? And they're like, well, 98% comes from the scheduler and then 2%. And I'm like, interesting. And I'm like, is there a lot of market left on the scheduling side? They're like, yeah, it's like a multiple $billion. I'm like, are you sure you don't just want to be the thing that you are and go win the rest of the market? No, we gotta. And they're like, okay. So
you mentioned clients. So what are some pivots, some transformations that you've gone through, if you can share anything, and also the kind of the meta analysis for companies about the value of use cases and trying to get use cases right?
Yeah, I mean, and you're saying some examples of actual clients?
Yeah, or just like, if you can, actual clients of like, we started here, this was the message, and now it's this. Or if you can't talk about specifics, that journey of kind of going step by step with that transformation.
Yeah. So a lot of times, some of the clients that we will work with, like, it comes down from usually when they're reaching out to us, they're in a point of trouble, right? Most people don't hire consultants and stuff to come in if there's not something broken, especially since how we're positioned is for like, your positioning is confusing and broken. So they're like, we know it is. So there's some level of struggle there, right? And most of the time,
self-admitting that they have a problem
Yes.
and they need help that they can't fix themselves.
Exactly. And so like, and we have got a fun collection of like before and afters on our website too, if anyone wants to see, where it's basically like, this is what they came in, this is what they left with. One of the funniest ones you should check out. So it's literally just, founder at Pulsar is the quote for the person. So this was the before, and I'll read this for anyone who is listening. The hero image was revolutionizing how humans talk to humans. That was the main thing that they had. And actually, I'll share this on the screen for anyone who's watching on the.
But it's kind of a fun game, actually. I feel like product marketers should get together and they should play the game of just like reading taglines, and then you have to guess or you have to pitch what that product and company is. So for this, it would be a hardware device that you put into your mouth, and then you accelerate how you can speak more words per minute, and then they have an earpiece that they can, I don't know.
Yes, exactly. So, first line, revolutionizing how humans talk to humans. When you go down, it says human connections for today's world.
And this is like the biggest text. If you can't see the screen, it's the biggest text on the screen. It's just big, bold statements of what Anthony's kind of reading through.
Yep, exactly. And then they have one of these scrolling things where it's human connections. And then if you wait a second, it says human conversations. You wait a second, it says human customer service, human interaction. So it's flipping like that. And then it says join the movement, join the human-centered revolution where real conversations and genuine care unite customers and businesses to create a more compassionate world of exceptional experiences. So that was that. So this was the after. Ready? This is going to blow your mind. This is where we got to by the end of the process. Give WhatsApp the customer service features you wish it had.
Wow.
And then you zoom in and it says, easily manage customer service conversations through the channel your customers know and love with Pulsar. So
it's
very
one
different.
Of those makeover moments. Yeah, it's one of those makeover moments where it's laughable or obvious in hindsight, but when you're actually in the weeds and you're running the company and you're trying to do this, I mean, I've done it numerous times over, and it's hard to get right. It's hard to be very clear with your words to say exactly what you do and get out of your head of my 10-year vision and how I'm going to transform the world and what I think this is and can be.
Yep. And this was interesting because it was a progressive narrowing over the process. And even as we keep going, right, like this problem section, your customers love talking to you on WhatsApp, but managing all the conversations is overwhelming and time consuming. You have to retype the answers, reshare resources. And this was a company that was mainly selling to customers in Europe. So it was like a lot of SMBs in Europe use WhatsApp. If we're in people listening from the States, this doesn't make quite as much sense, right? But in a lot of the rest of the world, they're using WhatsApp to like manage everything, like you're a dental office or whatever. So basically it's like this, and then they have all these features that basically like up level WhatsApp to make it significantly better for doing customer service. So they originally didn't, they had their investor pitch was effectively what the first homepage was. It was like, this is the message that we use to get investors excited. And then what they described to me was that there was this whole set of apps that they were going to help do this up leveling for, where it was like, it was going to start with WhatsApp. But they had all these other apps like they were going to do with like Facebook. And then it was going to be like this one global interface for doing customer service. And then and then beyond customer service, we'll be able to use it for sales and for marketing, all that stuff. So like, I get how it got to this level. And I'm like, I bet the investor pitch gave more context to make it make sense. Yeah. So we just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And we show them all these diagrams to like try to make the point. And it was really like getting them to be like, what do you want to have happen in the next 6 months? Right? Like, who's going to be the most likely people to do it? And so we got them to basically say, WhatsApp is probably our entry point, not Facebook and Instagram, because some of those features weren't even built yet. So they're like, we have stuff for WhatsApp. And then it was like, okay, what specifically on WhatsApp do you think is going to be your best bet for the next 6 months? And they're like, it's probably customer service. So by the end, we had shrunk this giant investor pitch of a 10-year world domination plan to this very specific use case around customer service. They were able to get some good traction right off the gate from doing that, because it was, it's so much like, again, showing that funnel of a really, really broad message doesn't really resonate with many people. And the more specific you get, it's like, if I'm a dental office in, some European country and I'm using WhatsApp and I see that message, I'm like, oh my gosh, I use it every day to do all my customer service questions. And it's really annoying. And I see this message, I'm going to be so much more likely to try the product because it's speaking my exact language than if I saw revolutionizing how humans communicate with humans or whatever it was.
Revolutionizing how humans communicate with humans to the point where they don't understand what you're communicating.
The irony.
Yeah, the irony. If you were to take So obviously people can work with you and kind of go through your process and your playbook. But if you're just kind of give people homework for how to do some of this on their own, what are the steps? Maybe talk me through the 4 questions and how you ask them and how you reflect on them, and then the action steps that you take thereafter.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll actually there's a canvas, like there's the business model canvas and all sorts of different canvases. We have our own canvas that we use with clients, as you can imagine. But this and I just shared it on LinkedIn, so you could go and look at this, because this is probably an easy place to start. And basically what we would say is you're working to flesh out answers to these questions. This main canvas is kind of the place where we live with most of the companies, and we say you could try this on your own. So like in example, and I'll share right there. Okay. So really ignore this top box for a second, this positioning strategy box, but then take these first 2 rows, right? Each of these boxes: target company type, target department, product category, primary use case, competitive alternative, problem summary, and differentiation summary. These
And
7
just
boxes.
again, for audio listeners, these are boxes that your customers would go through, fill in, and answer these questions to kind of get clarity on where they are. Yes?
Yes, exactly. So in this top row, we're trying to figure out, of these 4 boxes, do we have definitive answers for any of them? At the minimum, you need to answer either the primary use case of your product or what product category you are in. And if you answer those adequately, you actually don't necessarily need to answer what's my target company type, what's my target department, because what you're doing effectively is answering the question, what is this product? And so when I have a product in mind, let's say I have a CRM that I'm trying to sell. If someone says, what is your product? And I say, it's a CRM, I have given you an adequate answer. Like, you're like, oh, interesting. But let's say I'm not in a defined product category. I'm doing something new. And we like the example of Calendly, because we all use Calendly, but calls with it. In the early days of Calendly, they didn't really have a product category because they were doing something new. And so what they would say is a primary use case. So they said, what's Calendly? And you could say, oh, it's an app or software or whatever, some sort of like high level thing that lets you schedule meetings like over the internet, coordinate times to schedule meetings over the internet. So I'm telling the primary use case also an adequate way of answering, what is it?
Right. So if there's a predefined term that means something to people, you can use that heuristic of like, oh, well,
Yep.
you are a ride sharing app. But if you
Yep.
are a thing that doesn't have some category or bucket or simple term that you can use and everyone's like, oh, I know that, then it's like, well, this is what you do. This is the action that you can take with the thing, regardless of what the thing is, that clearly you're like, oh, well, I understand how someone might want to do that thing. You are that thing.
Exactly. And so here's a perfect example. This is a company called RB2B that is very, very controversial on LinkedIn right now. This is what their website says. Identify your anonymous website visitors, push their LinkedIn profiles to Slack.
Wow.
So
that's creepy.
very creepy. It doesn't necessarily matter for me to say what's the product category, because there isn't really one for this. If someone says, what is RB2B? And I say, well, it's an app that lets you identify your website visitors and then push their LinkedIn profiles to Slack. So like that right there is just leading with the primary use case. I want to know who's on my website, and this will tell me. So it's an adequate answer. And then when you say the first question, what is it? Then the second question of who is it for? Sometimes either the category or the use case is actually enough to answer both what is it and who is it for. So like take the Calendly example. If I'm trying to say schedule meetings, over email, that is in and of itself a segment of people.
Right. Not everyone needs to schedule meetings over email.
Exactly. I could further subdivide this by saying, I think I'm going to try to sell this to sales teams first. And I think I'm going to try to sell it to enterprise sales teams. But Calendly actually didn't do that. They were just doing a use case based segment or job to be done based segment or whatever you want phrase you want to use. So the first row of our canvas is really answering potentially what is it and who is it for? And these here can either answer one or both. And even the product category, right? So there's a new browser that a lot of people use in tech called Arc browser. And
Been
so
using it for a
Arc
year.
browser
It's
is
great.
you're using it right now.
Yeah.
They actually don't specify what types of companies should use it or what types of departments or personas. And they don't even give you a use case because there's many use cases for browsers. So by saying we are a web browser, they're actually also answering not just what is it, but who is it for, and giving the answer of anyone who uses a web browser. The web browser market is the segment. Again, they could further tighten it up and say it's specifically for marketing teams or tech people or productivity-minded individuals, whatever. And they could even add in a use case that could be like, it's really good for college students doing research, right? You're narrowing it down. So all of that stuff is for you. It's like, it's a question around segmentation. It's like, how do you want to segment the market? Segmentation doesn't always have to be done with like firmographics of like, your company has 100 employees and you have, this amount of revenue. That's not the only segmentation that matters. A lot of times segmentation that matters is something like literally a clear use case that a lot of people are trying to do or a category that you're trying to win. And then the second half of that, the corollary of it is, so I said, remember the 4 questions, what is it? Who is it for? That's what this first row does. And then what does it replace and why is it better is the second rows. So you're basically saying, like if I said with Calendly, if I said scheduling meetings over email, the competitive alternative for this strategy is actually probably what they even said this explicitly, back and forth emails. How do I schedule meetings over email? I just send emails back and forth. And so the problem of that is, you have to send multiple rounds of emails before you can find a time that works. And like for a while, Calendly said we're the best way to schedule meetings over email to schedule meetings without the back and forth emails. So they were basically giving you the positioning. Here's the use case. Here's a competitive alternative. And it was such an annoying competitive alternative. They didn't actually have to explicitly say like, don't you hate how annoying it is? It's like, of course you do. Everyone does. And then the differentiation was basically something along the lines of you can let other people book time directly on your calendar based on what you set as being available, right? Like that was the way, and I can't even spell, the way that Calendly differentiated related to this use case over the competitive alternative, which had this problem, which is like, this is how we did it better. So for people who are trying to do this themselves, when you're thinking about your own homepage or your own positioning, mapping out the answers to these 7 boxes, as many as you can, to give a really strong, cohesive end-to-end argument, that would be like the place that I would say would be your best bet to start. And then you can add on supporting messages and things like that later. But like, if you could just grasp those concepts, you'll be already in the top 1% of companies trying to position themselves, right? Because most people don't even do the basics of that.
That's phenomenal. I love how tactical you got with like going through those use cases, but I think it really helps emphasize the point of like, if you can't answer those questions succinctly, and I was even thinking about some of the companies that I'm involved in, Matter being one of them, as well as others, how would I answer those questions? And it's not necessarily an obvious answer. I think once you find the answer that you want to sit with or go with or push on, then it's like, oh yeah, of course that's it. But getting to the point of knowing what that one primary use case is, or that one differentiation aspect versus your alternative approach, it definitely is not a, oh, that's so obvious type thing, which is why, like you said, it puts you in that 1% of companies if you are able to really nail that messaging and understand who you are and who you're for.
And a lot of that comes down to like, so when we work with companies, we will fill out all the options, right? We will basically say, who are all the different types of companies you could work with? Who are all the different types of departments you could sell into? What are all the reasons people would use you and buy you, like the use cases? What are all the different categories you might fall into? What are the competitive alternatives? And then we will generate a series of these options, basically, which are different 6 to 12 month paths, right? And so when we look at the options next to each other, we'll say, listen, any of these 7 might work, and they all
Japan and
represent
Alaska might both work.
exactly perfect. Great callback, you know. So
Yeah.
any of those 7 might work, and it really comes down to like, where do you feel like you could actually succeed in delivering that message? Like, where do you feel like you could really make that argument work? And how much education is it going to require? Do you have the go-to-market team to do it, right? Like, if me and Rob, my co-founder, if neither of us knew how to do LinkedIn content or content in general, it would have been really hard to get this business off the ground. If we would have had to do some other angle, we might not have been able to do it. And we might have had to pick a different positioning that would have fit. Like, say we were both really good at cold emails. Maybe we would have had to change the positioning to work with the distribution strategy that we actually could execute. But because we both, we brought in some content background and stuff, it made sense to be able to do this more educational angle, where sometimes products, they won't work that way, right? Like, there'll be certain products where it'll be like, I like comparing the amount of time it takes to get Fletch, my business, for people to get it, versus like, I have this pop socket on the back of my phone, right? I'm like, they won me from one Instagram ad, I'm like, I got one ad and it was like, isn't it annoying holding your phone? Put your fingers on this. And I'm like, all right, I'm buying it. So depending on the product, there's just different levels of, education and
Also a good
convincing you have to
example
do.
of no product category for whatever the hell a pop socket is, but use case, right? And then also
100%.
what's the term? The alternative, or the bad alternative? What's the phrasing you use for that?
Well, I don't know about battle term. I mean, the 2 routes we would say is like, the use case based positioning would be like positioning around when you don't have a category, you'd position around
No, the
use
email
case.
back and forth part. What that is
Oh
called
yeah, sorry. Competitive alternative.
competitive alternative, right? Which is in theory worse than what your solution is. Otherwise, why would you exist?
Yeah, and like for them, like sometimes if you're in a category, so let's imagine like there are now pop socket competitors. I don't know if a category has formed enough, like phone,
Doodads,
accessories or something.
holders.
But their competitive alternative was just holding the phone normally, right? And so basically saying we have a better way to do that. Like, if you just hold the phone, it slips out of your hand, and you're laying in your bed and it falls on your face and stuff like that. We've all had that happen. Now you've got the pop socket for it. But if you're entering a mature market, you really have to take that category-based approach. Like, Arc browser can't be like, have you ever thought about visiting websites? Like, visiting websites is so tricky, like it's probably not going to work if you already have a category for that, web browsers. And so when you go on Arc Browser's website, they actually say, and let's see if it's still there, the top headline right now says, it's a quote from The Verge, Arc is the Chrome replacement I've been waiting for. So they're just doing straight category-based positioning and calling out the exact competitive alternative, placing themselves, like, because a lot of times if you choose the category route, it almost by extension chooses your competitive alternative. Like, if you say we're the best CRM, you're setting the bounds of who your competitors are to other CRMs. If you're saying we're the best way to schedule meetings, your potential alternatives could be very different. It could be better than an assistant doing it for you. It could be better than sending back and forth emails. And you might choose one, you might choose multiple. So it's like, it's very different. Like Airbnb is another example. They actually do use case positioning, because what category is Airbnb in? Like, I don't even know what that's called. Like, it's not a hotel. So like what they say is, like, if you're going on a vacation, finding somewhere to stay on a vacation is kind of like the the main use case. They basically say, don't get a hotel competitive alternative. You're gonna have to share your hotel with your kids. Like, you're all gonna be in the same room. If they go to bed, you have to go to bed. Get an Airbnb, a different category for this use case, and now your kids can go to bed upstairs. You can stay up and hang out with your friends, below. And they're running YouTube ads that are doing this exact full cohesive positioning story to try to win. When I'm thinking about going somewhere on vacation, finding some place to stay, that use case, Airbnb will claim the mental availability over a hotel, because they've shown me that there's a better way than what I was doing before.
Anthony, I feel like this has been like a wonderful, knowledge-filled, hands-on learning masterclass. This has been phenomenal. Thank you so much.
For sure. Thanks so much for having me. This is super fun.
Yeah. And if people want to go and find you and Rob, I'm guessing go consume some content and join the drip funnel and check out Fletch PMM?
Yeah, I mean, there really is no drip funnel other than, I mean, if you count the LinkedIn posts themselves as a drip funnel, although the
Yeah,
algorithm decides whether you're going to see it or not. So, you might only see one and never be dripped again. But yeah, LinkedIn would be great. Feel free to shoot me a direct connect request. I accept pretty much everyone, unless you're like openly trying to sell me your IT outsourcing services. We have no products, so just leave us alone. But yeah, connect with you on there. And then if you were interested in working with us, Fletch PMM, this is a great way to test. Does Anthony practice what he preach? When you read the Fletch PMM website, can you understand the answer to those 4 questions? What is it? Who is it for?
And if you
What is it
can't,
replace? Why is it better?
if you can't, send a DM to Anthony and tell him why.
Exactly. Yeah, perfect. I'll give you a discount.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony. I really appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks for having me. Super fun.
If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you check out this video right here. And if you really enjoyed it and you listened to the end, take 2 seconds and share the love so someone else might find it by clicking the thumbs up button and subscribing. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. But click that button.